So myself, Mahesh Somineni. So right now, I have started my learning journey to become a technical architect. As part of that journey, I have some learnings I'd like to share with this group. So first of all, thanks Andy for giving this opportunity. Okay. So now we can get started. The agenda today is right. We'll go through some of the identity basics and SAML. So mainly we use for authentication, and then OAuth for authorization, OpenID Connect for authentication and authorization, credits, and we can have a Q&A. Now, if we start with the identity basics, in the digital world, if we have to identify a person in any system, so that system has to assign a unique identifier to that person. So for example, like employee ID, or it can be a bank account number, or it can be passport, in anything, right? The system has to identify a person with the help of a unique identifier. So once we have that process, if that person has to log into the system, he will be providing his username and password, or sometimes two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. This entire process is called authentication. Once authenticated, he has to access some of the resources from the system. Determining what resources he can access, that is called authorization. So even in my first 5 years of my Salesforce journey, I always used to confuse between these two terms, authentication and authorization. I used to use that interchangeably, but now the difference is authentication is a processing of login to a system, and authorization is what exactly I'm going to access in that particular system. Now we talked about two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, all this stuff, right? If I have to log into 10 systems, it's remembering each and every username and password. It's a difficult task. So now if you see, right, almost all the enterprise systems, they have started using single sign-on from long back. This single sign-on process, the main important thing what we do in single sign-on, we do assertion between two systems. So one is identity and the second one is the system which we are going to access. This assertion happens with the help of SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. It's an open standard for authentication. What it does, it allows users to authenticate in one system, and then it gives access to multiple systems without having to re-authenticate themselves again. So now, examples if you see, right, almost all the enterprise companies and even Salesforce, so we use single sign-on. If you see some of the SAML basics, we talk about one is the system which will authenticate you, and the second system is the one from which you are going to access resources. So this one, the system which authenticates you, that we can call that as identity provider. This identity provider, it will have an inbuilt identity store, or sometimes, so it depends on the third-party identity store. What this identity store will contain? This contains the user attributes like username and hashed password, email, mobile number, and their role. So example for an identity store, if you see, right, Microsoft Active Directory, and we have some well-known identity providers. So Ping Identity or Okta, if you take. Coming to service provider, so this is the one which will allow us to access the resources, and it completely relies on the identity provider for authentication. Example, Salesforce or Workday or SAP. We can take any system which provides resources to users and relies on IDP for authentication. So now we have seen this one. So this single sign-on, normally it can be implemented in two processes. See, one is IDP initiated SAML flow. So here, if you are taking two systems, I'll log into a first system. For example, consider my company portal. I'll log into that one. And then from there, I'll try to access multiple services, Salesforce, Google Cloud, or Amazon, anything. So this one, if you see this flow, as an end user, initially, I'll try to go to identity providers login page. There, I will authenticate myself into IDP. So that IDP will navigate me to the service provider links. Here, if I try to access a service provider, so service, if I try to access a Salesforce, at that point of time, what this identity provider does, right? It sends the SAML assertion. So this person already authenticated in my system. So he is a legitimate user. He is okay to log in. So access the resources in the service, in the service provider system. This SAML assertion, if identity provider will send to service provider. Here in our case, consider it as a Salesforce. Salesforce, what it does, it asserts that SAML. So it validates that SAML, authenticates the user, and it creates a session ID. So that way, with the help of identity provider credentials, I'll access some of the resources from service provider. Okay. So this one, IDP initiated this process first. That's the reason we call this as IDP initiated SAML flow. Now, what if I directly go to the service provider system? For example, if I directly go to the Salesforce, I try to access some of the resources. So what Salesforce does in this case, I'm not going to enter Salesforce credentials. So I'll try to utilize my existing authentication for IDP. In this case, what it does, it will navigate me back to IDP website for authentication. I'll provide my username and password, RPFA or MFA. So IDP authenticates me again. From here, again same. So IDP, it sends a SAML assertion to service provider. Salesforce validates that assertion and then authenticates, creates a session ID. So now user is redirected to that particular service. So difference between these two is, one is identity provider initiates this process. Second one is service provider initiates this process. It navigates back to identity provider, and again it redirects. Post successful authentication, it redirects back to Salesforce service provider in our case.
Question.
Sure.
In both of those examples, so if we start with the other one, that would be like, in my mind, if I go to Okta first, and then I go to Google and get signed in automatically through Okta, that would be this one.
Right. So if you
or
see
even
that,
Salesforce. But then the second one would be, I go to Salesforce, Salesforce says, you're not authenticated. And instead of having me authenticate through Salesforce, because our identity provider is Okta, it redirects me to Okta. I log in with Okta, and that actually gives me the session in the Salesforce.
Exactly. So yeah, so we can take example of Google Workspace itself. I log into Google, and then I can access Google Sheets, slides, or presentation, anything. So without again having to re-authenticate. It can be any service. So Salesforce, again, it can be treated as identity provider as well, but it has limited capabilities. Okay. Now we can go to a small demo so that we can see how we can treat Salesforce as an identity provider and service provider as well.
Before we go to that, Brenda also asked in the chat window earlier. So if you use only Okta and no platform like Active Directory, is Okta then both the identity store and the identity provider?
Yeah, exactly. So some of the identity providers, they have their built-in identity store. Some they rely on the third parties, but some they have their identity store. That identity store will contain the user attributes. Okay. So Okta, it has its own identity store, I think. So that's the reason it no need to rely on third-party apps. Okay. We see a demo. Okay, we'll go back. I'll try to log into one of the Salesforce systems. So I logged into a Salesforce system. Now consider this as our identity provider. Okay.
I need to confirm that you are on it. If everyone notices, right?
Right.
But is joined in this part, this is going to be the identity array. So please take a note of the URL and then when it shows further, right? So you will know the difference when you do this.
Yes, yes, yeah. So this one, if you see, right? So consider this as an identity provider. So we are treating Salesforce as both identity provider and Salesforce service provider, right? So not to get confused. So these are our identity provider. Here, I navigated to setup. So if you search for identity provider, okay, you'll get an option. So this one, I already enabled this one. For our demo, I already enabled this one. But if you see, try to go back, okay. So enabling this one, it's just, we are going to check a box and then we'll provide one self-signed certificate. That's it. So it creates a certificate. It creates a certificate. So we can download that certificate and we can download that metadata. Okay. So now, this is the first step we have to do. We have to enable Salesforce as identity provider. Now I'll log into one more system that we can consider as service provider. I created too many arcs. So I have logged into this one. This one we can consider as service provider. See, once we have this identity provider set up, right, the next step is in the service provider org. In the service provider org, we have to navigate to single sign-on. We have to navigate to single sign-on. Here we have to enable SAML. And then, so these are single sign-on configuration. Either we can do it manually, or we downloaded the metadata here. We download the metadata and certificate from identity provider. We can use that one, that option, and we can create it. So while creating, right, it will auto-populate all the fields. So we have to make sure that the issuer here is identity provider. And here is service provider domain. Service provider domain. So to identify a person between two systems, so we need a common attribute. That common attribute can be Salesforce username or federation ID or user ID of the user object. Okay. So so in our application, in our demo, we are using federation ID. We're using federation ID. So to identify the person between two systems. So once we do this one, see, everything will get auto-populated. So because of the metadata we have downloaded, and if you see the certificate, it has expiry date up to 26 September 2024. Okay. Once we do this one, if I go back to this one, it generates login and logout URL as well. It generates automatically login and logout URL. This URL, we have to take this URL and go back to this identity provider. Okay. Here, now the step number 3, in the identity provider website, what we are going to do, right? So we'll go to the apps. We go to the apps. We have to create a connected app for this purpose. For SAML assertion, to generate the SAML assertion. Here again, if you see, some basic details, you can give some basic details and enable SAML. This entity ID and ACS URL, login URL, it should match with the service provider's URL. In the single sign-on settings, we selected Federation ID. So here also it should be Federation ID. Remaining everything, it will get auto-generated. So this is the issuer, identity provider. Okay. So this is step number 3. We have to create a connected app. And the last step here is we go to my domain. In my domain, if we go to the authentication configuration here, so this is the SF sign-on. This is the name we had given for our single sign-on. So this one, I enabled this one here. Okay, so this is mandatory step. I'll log out. I'll log out from both the systems. So now this is the domain URL for our service provider. So I'm not going to give credentials for this one. Instead, I will try login with SF sign-on. So now what it does, it navigates us to the identity provider login URL. If you see, it got navigated. It got navigated. One second. So again, post authentication, it redirected back to our service system. So this is how, right, we can enable Salesforce as identity provider and service provider as well. Now we'll go back here. So one important thing to note here, right? Okay, if I go here, how we will identify that person? So we had given the attribute as Federation ID. I'll go to the user details. Okay. If you see the single sign-on information here, Federation ID, I had given this one. This should match with the one we have in the identity provider. If not, it's not going to work. We see here, right? So it should get matched. Okay. For example, so for all the people, for all the users, single sign-on is working, but for some users, for some of the users, it's not working. So the main issue will be with Federation ID. Okay. No,
Can Federation ID be anything?
it can be anything. It can be anything.
Can be alphanumeric. Either it's a number, within a combination.
Yeah, in both the place, it should match. That's it. It can be
Yeah.
anything.
And related question here on the chat, it says Federation ID was created by you or the system?
No, I have given this federation ID. It can be anything. It can be anything. So I just given
It
as
needs to match.
yeah, it
That's
has
the
to match.
key.
That's it.
It can
That's the
be
key.
username, right?
Yeah.
You just use your
Yeah, it can be username. It can be directly username. So we have that option as well. So in the single sign-on settings, right, we have that option as well. It can be just username.
But the
Or
point is,
user
it
ID.
should be unique. So it should be unique across when you are using that. That's the key.
So ideally, so we treat Salesforce as service provider and we use Okta or Ping Identity as federation ID, right? So the systems, so my company's username, ideally that will be the federation ID in real time. Any other questions on this one?
So you could have, I mean, in big enterprise systems, you usually have the provider, and then you have so many different systems you log in.
So many different.
And ideally, that federation ID should be unique for that one single person across.
Yes,
Just
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just the point, right, what Mahesh has covered upon, right? I think we all work in the different companies, right? Every client will have their own IDP. Okay? Let's say in a company, if they are using Ping Identity, the moment when you log in with Ping Identity, from there, right? Like, first thing you might open your mail, Outlook, or you might open your Teams, or you might open your OneDrive or anything. So the first key thing is, if you are authenticated successfully with your Ping Identity as the IDP, the other applications, whatever the service provider are accessing, it will be seamless. So that's where the demo, when you was walking through it, you made it very clear, right? One system is an IDP, another system is a service provider. So I think that's the key crux where, see, a user can come on any of the flow. You can directly first authenticate it with IDP, and then he can go to service provider. It's up to them. Whatever choice they come, we verify whether the user is authenticated and validated, then only they can access it. So that's where.
So the main thing what happens, right? Either in both the flows, what happens, right? See, service provider, it asks for a SAML assertion. Identity provider, it will provide that SAML assertion in XML format. If that assertion is valid and so service provider validates that one, if it's a success, it will allow that person to access the service. That's it. So main thing is SAML request and response.
And we call it, I mean, I'm just gonna try to make this maybe a little bit simple for the less technical like me, is like, the reason why we probably call this assertion is we have to actually pass all the information to the system for the system to verify. The system doesn't share any information with us. Like when you pass the information, it kind of like in testing assertion, we have the assertion, we actually validating whether it's true or false, right?
Right.
So you send the information to the system and the system is gonna say like, that checks out, right?
That checks out.
So you can get it.
Yes. That checks out.
And one more question, the audience is asking, will you be able to share the slides with the audience?
Sure, for sure.
Okay.
That's why we prepared.
All right, so we're recording too, like with your permission, so we're gonna share that also on
No,
YouTube.
that's totally fine.
Is that okay? All right, so, thank you.
Okay, yeah. See, now we talked about authentication. The next thing is, once we get authenticated, we have to access some resources. We have to determine the process. So what are the resources I can access once I get authenticated? Or if a system gets authenticated into another system, what are the resources it can access? For that, we have to start with OAuth, Open Authorization. It's an open standard for authorization. Almost all the applications now, if you see, right, many integrations, so connecting with Salesforce or any other target system, they use OAuth. There is OAuth. So this one, it has number of process. So the main thing it does, right, in some of the process, it tries to authenticate for the first time, and then, so based on the target system and the scope specified, it can access the system. So that we'll see in depth. So the moment we talk about OAuth, normally we hear about tokens. So some of the important tokens we have, right? Authorization code. So this authorization code we use in some of the process. So this one is a short-lived token. So 5 or 10 minutes, it is used to obtain the access token. This access token is an important one. This is the one in all the process we try to get. This token is important to access the resource from the target system. Again, this access token, it may get expired. It will get expired. After if the session is idle, right? It will get expired. At that point of time, we need a seamless integration between two systems. So for that one, if it get expired, immediately we use a refresh token to obtain the new access token, so that end user won't know all this process. So system, it will take care of on its own. It will check for the access token. If it is not valid, it will use refresh token to get the access token. And JWT token. So this is like, it's an encoded user information. It's an encoded user information, user consent. So we will send we'll share between source and target systems. What it contains, right? It contains times about a user. So what exact URL we are trying to access, and what is the user ID. So this one, the benefit of this one is it can't be tampered. It can't be tampered in between the transaction. That's the main benefit. We use this one in some of the flows. Now, if we go deep, okay. So it has a number of process. All these process, we try to get access token. Here, if you see this one, we talk about some of the flows today. Web server flow. If we need an integration between a website with secure server, which can store client credentials securely, client secret, client ID and client secret securely. In that case, we can go with this flow. So before going to this one, right, I would like to share a connected app. So all these integrations, it happens with the help of a connected app. So we create inside Salesforce. Okay, I have logged into one of the Salesforce systems. Apps. So if we see here, we have created a connected app. We have to create a new one. So what we do? So these are the basic details we give, our connected app name and contact information. And then, so we are discussing about OAuth, right? We enable this OAuth settings. So this callback URL, once system gets the request, if it has to send back the code, where exactly it has to send back that code. So this callback URL is important in some of the flows. Okay. So this should be the URL from where we are getting request. And here, right, we select the scope. We can give full access, or so if we give full access, right, they'll be able to access everything inside our Salesforce, or we can give manage user data via APIs. So they can access only via API. They can access data. And we discussed about refresh token, right? So if it should be a seamless integration, we need this refresh token. So we have to select this as a scope. So these are the two scopes we have to select. And we have to select this one, require secret for web server flow to make it more secure. Require secret for refresh token flow. This is also one of the flows we are going to discuss. But this refresh token flow, right, it helps us to get the new access token. Whenever access token gets expired, it helps us to get the new access token. We already created an app. we'll use the same one. We'll use the same one. So I'm using Postman to connect to Salesforce. Okay. So now let's see, right? So what exactly will happen in web server flow? We create a connected app. Okay. So this connected app, what it gives us? It gives us client ID and client secret. Client ID and client secret that we are going to use. See, in web server flow, our first step is we have to get the authorization code. We have to get the authorization code. That code will be used to get access token. So using access token, we can access the resources within our scope. Within our scope. Okay. We go to the first step. First step is get authorization code. This is the client ID and client secret. So in the authorization code, we don't need to give secret, client secret. You see here, you can get client ID and client secret. It's pre-configured. Already did this once. From the content app, you are going to get the client ID and the redirect URI. This is the URI. You should make sure that it matches with one of the callback URLs you have here in the connected app. And then response type. Response type to get the authorization code is code. Now, if we hit a request to Salesforce, okay, see, we are mentioning a redirect URI. The moment we mention redirect URI, so the code we are going to get, that also it will send back to this particular redirect URI. Okay. To get that one, I'm going to use send and download. Okay. I'll open this HTML page.
There is something that we need to ask. Mention something.
So if you see here, these are redirect URI. For this redirect URI, so code, this authorization code got posted back from Salesforce. What exactly happened in between? So here, already logged into the system. That is the reason. So this authentication, right? It didn't show me any pop-up, but usually it shows me a pop-up. Let's try one more time. I'll try to log out. Okay. I'll try to get this authorization code one more time. Okay. I'll open this HTML page. If you see, right, it asked me to log into that particular system. Which system I have to connect with? It is asking me to log into that one. Okay, I will log in. So I am giving my consent for the authentication. Authentication is complete. Now if you see right, to the redirect URI, we got the code, authorization code. Okay. So let's decode this code. I'll use one of the public website to decode this one. See, the same code we can use as is. At the last, we have this percentage 3D, right? That is equal to. So we'll try to decode. Okay. Okay, so equal to. Now we got the authorization code. Now the next step is using this authorization code, we have to get the access token. This web server flow. Here, if you see, right, we are using client ID and client secret. Grant type is authorization code. This is important to note. In web server flow, we use the grant type as authorization code. And this is the code we received. This is the code we received. I tested that one. Okay. Redirect URI. Here also you have to mention that redirect URI. It's a post request. So if you hit the request, now if you see here, you got the access token and you got the refresh token as well. You got the access token and you got the refresh token as well. So we need access token to access the resources. What I can access? The scope we mentioned there is, we can manage user data via APIs. Step 3 is, now we got the access token. I'll copy this one. Okay. So again, this one, right? If you see URL, this is the domain URL. Maybe here also, right? I'll try to show the URL. If you see here, in the authorization code, it should be OAuth authorize. Okay. So while getting token, in all the process, it will be OAuth to token. Here, while accessing resources, so this is the domain URL, services. I'm trying to access data. So it's a query. So what I'm doing, right? Select ID name from user. For that, I'm going to, in the headers, bearer space, the access token. Okay. Now I'll send the request. If you see this one, right? We got there are total 7 users. So we queried only for ID and name. So ID, name. We got all the records. So one thing to remember here is, while getting access token, we are sending client secret as well. That is the reason, if there is a integration request for a website with secured server, then only we'll go with this flow. Okay. Any questions in this one?
Well, thank you. Let's just check your online chat. See if anybody has.
So people would add some questions. So someone is asking about like how the certificate can be generated.
Sure.
They just told them that I identity folder. And someone was asking about the setup, right? How do you go and enable the single sign-on? It can be whether it can be done only on classic or lightning. It can be done both.
It can be done in both. Yeah.
That's one thing.
It can be done in both.
Why would you need to get an access token? I mean, isn't it automatically created? Like.
So the access token, right? If we are integrating two systems, so access token is the one, it will help us to access some of the resources from the target system. That is the reason we have to get this access token. In all these flows, our end goal is we have to get the access token to access resources.
Okay.
So there are multiple processes.
Does that go back to the beginning where we talked about authorization versus authentication versus authorization? So first we authenticate, then this is our authorization.
Right. See, initially I'm giving my consent to access. So I'm giving my consent for this request to get the authorization code. This is the first step. User consent exists in this one. So I got the authorization code. Now the next step is I'll get the access token using the authorization code I have received. So now I got the access token. So I can access any resource within my scope defined in the connected app using this token. Yeah.
So
to give a real life example, let's talk about, right? Let's say, as a person, we all go to different vacation spots. You want to go to a hotel, correct? So when you first go and check in, whether you booked online or whatever the thing, right? What you do, you just go and show your DL, and then you say, right, that I made the payment. So what exactly happens over this? You are getting authorized page. That's your big done. And then what happens, right? They give a key, right? Access card or something. So that access card does not give you access to all the rooms in the world, right? It is only to a specific room. So that's where the tax is. And also depending upon what kind of, let's say what kind of premium you put, right? Like access, right? You can go to the swimming pool or the club or the conference, right? That is where this, if you connect that part with this, that's where you are authorized to get into this building. And then based on the access token, we are telling you, hey, this person can go to this, he can access the amenity center, the conference and other areas. He may not give an access to the other, let's say, private centers or some other things. So that's where the access token, what is very important, what exactly is the access limitation. And you can show this to that UI.
Sure.
What's an example of we use the token?
Okay.
Like you said, pool or room,
Yeah.
what's
So
the
here if we see,
resource
right?
that
See,
you need?
here if we see the resources, right? For example, I have written information. I have written information from Salesforce. Okay. So this is an example, right? I want to display all the users I have in my Salesforce. So if we see here, the resource I'm trying to access is user object. I want ID and name. This is the resource I'm trying to access. Not only this one, the object as well. Okay. I don't know if I have accounts in my system. So, but we see this one, right? I'll send this request again. See, I have 13 accounts in my system. I can access all these accounts and I can display in the website. So these are my accounts. It can be business accounts or consumers. For example, if you take, those are contacts for us. Right. Yes, it's an. You see that I have 20 contacts in my system. I'm getting all the information here. So this information I can display in the website. So this is the resource. Yes. So now we have seen this one for presentation. So if you see the flow here, so first what we are trying to do. So this is our client app, here is our website. Consider this as a website. It will try for, so if you look for existing valid access token, if not found, then it will send an authorization code. Salesforce, it checks for the session token, valid session token. If not found, then it authenticates. So user has to authenticate here in this web server flow and authorize. He has to give his consent. Then Salesforce will send the authorization code back. With the help of authorization code, again, this client, it will ask for access token. Salesforce here, both authorization server and resource server, it will send the access token back with the help of the resources specified within our scope in the connected app. Now we can go. Now this is an example for a website with secure server. What if that website doesn't have a secure server? It can't store securely. In that case, we have to go with user agent flow. In that case, we have to go with user agent. Mobile apps, we can go with user agent flow. Here, we won't use client. We won't use client secret. Directly, we try to get access token. We won't get the authorization code. So here, the steps. Here, right? So there's no concept of gets one. So directly we get the access token. Directly we get the access token. With the help of access token, again, we can fetch resources. Scope. For this one, we can use the same connected app we have created earlier. So there is nothing specific we have to do for this one for user agent flow. Response type should be token, and we give the client ID. Here, if you see, we are not giving any client secret. Redirect URI we are giving. Okay. Try to hit this one. Request. So whenever I have a redirect URI, right? So that code also, it will get posted back to that redirect URI. That's why I'm trying to use. It's a success. Okay, so if you see here, right, it is asking me. So connected app we have created. So these are things it will try to access. This is the scope we have specified by yellow. For this callback URL, access token got posted back. Okay. Try to copy this one.
So what it was doing is it was asking for authorization. But
yeah, user
because you haven't been authenticated automatically, it's going for user authentication in order to give you the authorization to the.
Right. Initial setup, it will ask for it. So once we get the access token, with the help of refresh token, we can get access token each and every time. So if the access token gets expired, this one.
Oh yeah, they're too similar. They should have picked like two names like A and B or something. You know, that authorization and authentication.
Now I'll try to access resources. Again, it's the same thing. So we get 7 users. It can be anything. So for our demo, right, I'm just trying to query users. Okay, I'll go back to the flow. So here, what exactly it does, right? Okay, so client app, it will ask Salesforce for the access token directly without sending the client secret. So it checks for the valid session token. User authenticates and authorizes the client app to access the resources that we have seen just now. So once this authentication is completed, then here it will redirect with the access token in the URL that we can use to access the resources. So this one we have seen. This we can use for single page applications or native mobile apps. The next one is the JWT bearer token flow. So this one here, user, he won't give any consent. He won't give any consent. It's mainly for the server to server integrations. Here directly he can ask for the access token by sending a JWT token. JWT token is a JSON web token. It will contain the claims about the user. It will have user context, but it won't have user consent. In the JWT token, we can decode, if we decode that one, we'll be able to see the login URL and the username, but user is not going to give any consent. For this, specifically what we have to do, right? So while sending, so we have to send JWT token to get the access token. Before that, in the connected app, we have to pre-authorize that particular app. I'll show this one.
Yeah, you should probably probably by level because online participation is doing a little bit.
Yeah.
So we are okay. Thank you.
So I have created a container for this one as well, JWT token flow. Okay. So here, I'll show the configuration. I'll show the configuration. Callback URL can be anything here. So it's a server to server integration. So here I have downloaded that, so I have uploaded that JWT token. Scope, again, we can select. So it's the same as remaining flows. So main difference here is, so we have to upload a JWT certificate, and we have to pre-authorize admin. So who are going to access this one, right? So we are going to pre-authorize that particular person. It can be system administrator or integration user. We are going to pre-authorize those people. So here, if you see, right, I have enabled system administrator. Admin approved users are pre-authorized. That is the reason it doesn't need user consent, but it has user context. Mainly it is for server to server integration. I have Postman as well for this one. Maybe I'll try to share that collection so that you people can explore. So the next one is client credentials flow. These also again for server to server integration, but this is not as secure as JWT bearer token. So there we are encoding user information, and we are creating a token and sending the request. But here, so directly we try to get the access token with the grant type client credentials. Okay. Grant type etc, right? Client credentials. We are just sending a client ID and client secret. There is no user context or user consent in this one. Purely for server to server integration. You see, I got the access token. With this access token, I can access the resources. For this, important thing for this one, right? In the connected app, you can use the connected app you created for web server flow. You have to enable this setting, enable client credentials flow. So
So what would be the use case? Like, these are two very trusted systems and
right,
give access to anything without a user logging.
right. So middleware, right? So if we take example of a middleware, if we have a APG or MuleSoft, so any of these kind of middlewares, so where there is no user involvement directly, so there is no user context, so that can be a best use case for this one, to connect two systems with the help of a middleware. Okay. That can be example for this one. Here we already discussed that it doesn't has any user context and user consent, but if we are creating a records with this flow, so that should be tracked, right? For that, we have a running user inside connected app. So this also we have to make sure we are giving a running user.
Can we make that as the automated process user, or does it have to be a user that's credentialed?
It should be a credential in our, yeah, it can be integration user. Integration user.
I think we have 5
Yes, yeah. No, I was wondering, because they have that automated process user that
Yeah, so that
isn't an integration user per se, it's just like, you know.
it is for inbuilt process with Salesforce.
Yeah, so I couldn't use that.
We can give it, I doubt if we allow us to do it.
See the next one, right? Device flow. This is also one of the process. Okay. This one, what exactly it does, right? See, normally, if we take the example of smart TVs, any smart applications that you see, if we have to log into that one, either we can give username and password, or we can use a QR code. Yeah. With the help of QR code, we can authenticate, or in some cases, it will show as a URL and it will show a human readable user code. Human readable user code. So we'll go in a separate browser, in a separate device. We go to that URL, we give our device ID, adding to that. So that human readable user code, we use that one for the authentication here. So once we do that one, so Salesforce or any authorization server, it validates and then it generates access and refresh token. Best example is smart. So in the smart TVs, we see number of apps, right? Multiple apps. We see that human readable code. We can go to a URL and we can enter that enter human readable code, so which can allow us to access the application in smart TVs. Yeah. And then asset token flow. These for Internet of Things, for example, smart sensors or smart lights. So anything, right? Anything, a device with limited capabilities. So there we can use this flow. This flow again, it will have a, so for that particular device with limited capabilities. For example, smart lights. Okay. So there will be an app. In that app, we register. Here we send the JWT token. Here we send the JWT token, and then we request for access token. Salesforce, it validates that JWT token. How exactly it can validate that JWT token? So here, right, while sending, it signs any JWT token, right? So not only this one, it signs using a private key. Salesforce, it validates the token using a public key. I'll try to show that example. If we go to HTTPS, okay. So if you see, right, almost all the systems, all the enterprise applications, they publish their public keys. The algorithm they use, the key ID and the public key. With the help of this public key, so if Salesforce signs a certificate, so JWT token, and it sends to some other system, with the help of this public key, so they can validate. That's how validation happens.
That it is indeed Salesforce that actually.
Right. So in our case, yeah, Salesforce validates that one. In our case, Salesforce validates that one. If that is success, it will return the access token. Once it returns the access token, see, we have to get some metadata from the device, from the smart lights or anything, right? So for that, the device should be online. So once we have the access token, with the help of that one, so we can get the device ID. Now we use both access token and device ID to get that asset token. What this asset token does, right? So it can post data from this device to the client tab frequently.
Or straight to the internet. So like
Yes,
if I'm looking at like a light, so we have to connect to the light via Bluetooth first.
Right.
And then we connect to the authorization server with our info. And then we say, do you want to authorize this device? We say yes, because I'm connected to that device via Bluetooth. It now connects, handshakes. I pass it my Wi-Fi. That light now knows my Wi-Fi, and over the internet, it uses the response to now communicate with
the client tab. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with the client tab, or it can be any website, right?
How much more do we have?
We have. I'll try to wrap up in some 10 to 15 minutes.
I think we have enough of it.
Sure. Yeah. So the next one, right? Username password flow. Here, directly we use Salesforce username and password. Okay. So to get the access token. So this is the least secured one. Salesforce is not suggesting to use this one for any integration. This can be used only for testing purposes.
Okay, good. Don't use this. Not trying to
See, now we have seen, already we have seen the demo of OAuth flows. So we have seen web server flow, we have seen user agent flow. Now, right? So I'm not going to show remaining flows demo, but I'll try to share that collection so that you can explore on your own. See, now we have seen multiple OAuth flows. The main thing is, right, if we have use case to integrate two systems, knowing which OAuth flow we have to use, that's the important one. For example, if we have user context, if there's a user involved, user context is there. So I'll go with user context is not there, Then, so we can quickly go with client credentials flow. If user context is there, but we don't have user consent, in that case, we will go for JWT barrel token flow. Here, we are pre-approving the person. We have seen that one. So now, we have both user context and user consent. It's a website with secure server. Then we directly go with web server flow. If that's a single page application or native mobile application, we can go with user agent flow or web server with PKCE. This is a new flow. So almost all the systems have started using this one. So user agent flow, we are not using any client secret. With the help of just a client ID, we are getting the access token. That's not that much secure. So Salesforce also suggesting to go with web server with PKCE. Okay. Here what we do, right? So we generate a code challenge and code challenge method. While getting authorization code, we send that code challenge and code challenge method. Once we get that authorization code, while getting access token, we send the code verifier. So because of that one, the authorization system knows that the person who requested authorization code and the person who is requesting as access token, both are same. It's not got tampered in between. Okay. If it's a device with limited capabilities, then we can go with device flow. So these are all about OAuth. Okay, we have a number of those, so we're not going to discuss all those now. But now we have discussed about authentication and authorization. What if we need both authentication and authorization in one go? For that, we have OpenID Connect. So this one, it's built on top of OAuth. It's built on top of OAuth. On top of OAuth, it adds identity layer. So this main best example, right? Social sign-on. If you go to any website now, almost all the websites will display the option login with Google, login with Facebook. So we get this option. So this is for social sign-on. So we discussed that it adds a identity layer. How it can add the identity layer, right? It sends a ID token. With the help of ID token, so that again is a JWT format. System know that, so this ID token contains essential user information like, so the person's username and no login URL. So it will have, right, encoded JWT token. I'll try to show one of the ID token. Here, right, same like in single sign-on, here also we'll have relaying party, same as service provider, OIDC provider, same as identity provider. This relaying party, it relays completely on OIDC provider for the authentication. Okay. Now we can see a quick demo. I'll try to make it. So I'll try to use Google as OpenID Connect provider. Here I have created a project. So in the OAuth consent screen, I have created an app. So that app name is social sign-on. This can be anything. Here, I have to list down authorized domains as salesforce.com and force.com. So we are going to access it. So our relaying party is Salesforce, right? That's why we have to give that one. So once I do that, if you see the scope, we can select scope here. See, I'm trying to access user info. So email, profile, and OpenID. This OpenID is, this scope is required to get the ID token. Adding to that, it opens as scope for almost all the public Google libraries. I can access Drive or Sheets or anything. Anything, it's open for the user. Okay. Now, once I do that one, I need a client ID and client secret, right? So it's built on top of OAuth. So I need client ID and client secret as well. So I create a OAuth 2.0 credentials, client ID and client secret. Okay. Now I'll go back to Salesforce. Okay. So now if you see, right, authentication provider, 1 second. Okay, so OAuth providers. Okay, OAuth providers. Already Salesforce supports some of the standard OpenID Connect providers. So we can select any, but for our example, I have selected Google. If you see the configuration of this one, I have used the client ID as consumer secret key, consumer key here, and consumer secret. So which I got from the Google app. So these are the so URLs, endpoint URLs. These for authorization and token. I'm trying to get user info. That's the reason, right? So I have given this URL. Default scope. The scope I selected in the Google, email, OpenID, and profile. So when I try to create this one, right, it generates a registration handler. Normal. So it generates a registration handler. If time permits, I'll try to explain that and that as well. Once I do this one, okay, that's it. It generates all the Salesforce configuration URLs. The important thing next is, if I go to my domain, in the authentication configuration, I have to enable that one as well. Okay. Google, I have enabled Google as well. Okay. This is the name for my OAuth provider, so authentication provider. Now I'll log out from this one. You see, right? So I have an option for this one. See what it does, right? It takes my Google email and it tries to validate with my username's email. If it matches, it allows me to log in. I logged out. Now I signed with the help of Google. So already I logged in to Google. So that's why, right? So it's navigated back to Salesforce. I told, right, it will create a registration handler. So this is the registration handler it will create. It's an Apex class. It implements an interface registration handler, auth.registration handler. Two methods are important in this one. One is create user and one is update user. I don't want to create new users. That's why I create a custom registration handler. I use that one. I think it's important to show this one. Here, what I'm doing, right? So I implemented both these methods. Here, I'm matching Gmail, so Google's email with my user's email. If that matches, I'm returning success. So with this validation, it will allow me to access the Salesforce. Okay. So this is a demo for OpenID Connect. Okay. So benefits, if we talk about the benefits of SAML, OAuth, and OpenID Connect, right? Improved user experience. I don't want to log into n number of systems. I can log into one system and I can access multiple services. Increase the security. We don't have to worry about security for each and every system. If we take care of one system, the remaining systems, right? So directly we can access without security concerns. Reduce costs. So I can develop a service. I don't have to worry about the identity layer. I can delegate that to a third-party system like Okta or Ping Identity. I can give that to that one. Okay. So we don't need to worry about the maintenance. Improved scalability. If I implement this for one service, I can extend this for multiple services. Okay. Next, credits. I think we all have know, I think, this particular book, Becoming a Salesforce Certified Technical Architect. So Tamim Bahri's book. So this gave me a lot of knowledge. So in preparing this presentation, and Salesforce Help, my friends and Salesforce community. So Mohan here, my colleague. So yeah, he also collaborated with me for this presentation, and some of my friends, right, and even Salesforce community. So each and every person are willing to share their knowledge. That's very good sign. So in Salesforce community mainly I see. And Andy, he encouraged me multiple times to do this presentation. Okay. Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you all.
Excellent.
Yeah.